Hello and welcome back. This is Jennifer McGuire and I hope you're having a good week. Today I am focusing on techniques for doing inlay and dimension with background dyes. Now you could do these techniques with other dyes also. They just seem to be most effective with background dyes. So I know that it can be challenging to do inlay techniques when there's lots of pieces and to also provide dimension when there's lots of pieces. So I'm going to show you a few different methods today to be able to make the process easy and faster. For my first example, I wanted to show you how to use craft foam so that all of these intricate little pieces in the background can be raised on your card. This is technique number 1. So I'm starting with an inked panel. I just wanted to have like a mix of color on the front of my card. You could ink this up however you want. I'm using Distress Oxide ink on white cardstock. When I'm blending these colors together, I just make sure that I overlap them. That helps to get a nice blend from one color to the next. Once I'm done inking this, I want to put craft foam on the back of it. I'm taking Stick It double-sided adhesive sheet and putting on the back of that inked panel. This is a very thin double-sided adhesive that die cuts nicely. You want to press it into place firmly with a bone folder just to make sure that it's connected to that paper. Now I'm going to remove the other release paper from it and add a piece of white craft foam. This has a little dimension to it and it actually die cuts quite nicely. It will flatten when you run it through your die cut machine, but it'll pop up over time. The die that I'm using today is from Neat and Tangled. It's the Scalloped cover die. This is one of my favorites of all time. I've used it a few times before in videos. And I'm running this through my Gemini Junior die cut machine. However, you can use any die cut machine you may have. I know this also works with the Big Shot nicely. You may need to use a shim, like a metal adapter shim, to make sure there's enough pressure to cut through it. But I tried it several times and I never had a problem with it cutting through. It looks like it doesn't cut through, but it does. Okay, so now all the pieces will come out of the die together, which is great because it'll make our next step easier. So I flipped it over, and on all the little pieces, I'm putting a little bit of Gina Connect glue. This is a very strong liquid adhesive. So I'm not putting this adhesive on the outline of the pattern, just the little pieces, and it really doesn't take that long at all. Once I've put glue on each of the little pieces, I'm going to take this and put it on the front of a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch top folding note card. Now I'll put something heavy on here and let it dry. You want this to dry before you move on. It'll make the results much better. Doesn't take too long, maybe 10 or 15 minutes. Then you can remove the outline. And what's left behind are all those little pieces with dimension behind them. And it looks so cool. And you didn't have to do each piece individually. Another great thing is you have that negative space, the outline piece. And it has dimension on the back of it too. So you can glue that onto another card and you have 2 cards made out of this one process. If you find that your die doesn't really want to cut through the cardstock and the craft foam, you can try using a lighter weight cardstock, like an 80-pound cardstock. Okay, now to decorate these cards, I'm using the new Neat and Tangled Celebrate You stamp set and the die set. They're sold separately, or you can buy them together. So this stamp set is very special. The owner of Neat and Tangled's name is Danielle, and she has the biggest heart. Well, unfortunately, a couple years ago, her dad was diagnosed with CRPS, which is complex regional pain syndrome, which is supposed to be horribly painful. He needed to find some treatments, and after trying many things, he found a care center that helped him significantly. And he's now in remission and living his best life. So Danielle wants to pay it forward and help others who might have the same syndrome. So the money made from this stamp set will be donated to charities that help others with the same condition. So I encourage you to check it out. It's a great cause and also a great product. Okay, so I used the die here to cut out the words Celebrate You from black cardstock that has Stick It adhesive on the back. By putting the adhesive on the back before die cutting, I end up with little letter stickers that I can easily apply. Now I used the shadow die from the Celebrate You to die cut from a shimmer vellum, and then I put on each of the letters for the Celebrate You. Once I have them in place, I flip it over and use a bone folder to really press that Stick It adhesive in place. The nice thing is that it doesn't stick till pressed in place, so you can move it around and get it positioned just right. And then you just want to add pressure to make it stick. I decided to leave off the word U on this particular example, so I'm just cutting off the bottom of that shadow die cut before adhering it to my card. Now, since I used Vellum, I know there are Vellum adhesives out there, but I'm really picky, and I found that the best adhesive for Vellum is just any adhesive that you can hide. So I'm using lots of dots of the Gina Connect adhesive and putting it behind where the letters are, and then I can add that onto the dimension of my card. I finished it off with a few little gems, but I kept the card very simple because I wanted the focus to be on the dimension in that background. I did stamp Look How Far You've Come in the inside of the card thanks to that Celebrate You stamp set, and I thought I'd make a bunch of these Celebrate You cards just to give to people who I know have been working really hard in their life or have overcome something. I think encouragement cards are the best to give. Okay, now with the negative space of that one, I also made a celebration card using a different Neat and Tangled die set. This is the Hooray die set. I've used this in videos before. And you have the large word Hooray die and the shadow die. I used white cardstock for the shadow and black for the Hooray. And you can see that outline has fun dimension to it. And I just added a few gemstones for accents. So this first example shows how you can put craft foam on the back of your cardstock before die cutting so that you end up with pieces that have the dimension already attached. Okay, I wanted to show you a couple other options for adding dimension to little pieces of a background like this. Now, there are a couple more ways to do, and I recommend testing your die out with cardstock to figure out which way is best from the rest of the techniques I have to share. So I'm going to start by just taking this die, the Polygon die from Neat and Tangled, and I'm just cutting it from some white cardstock. Ignore that green card over there. So I'm just running this through my die cut machine, nothing on it, just white cardstock. And I notice that the die cuts come out of the die easily, and most of the pieces stay in place. So I'm going to do a technique where I take all the pieces out at once. Kind of like before, a little bit different. So I have an inked piece of cardstock here, nothing on it, no adhesive, just cardstock, that I'm running through my die cut machine with the Polygon die. Now I'm going to carefully take the paper out, and you'll see all the pieces are connected. Now don't touch this. Instead, grab a piece of masking paper. I use Avery removable adhesive sheet. Anything sticky would work. And I'm going to lay that over all of those die cut pieces. That way I can pick them all up at once and be sure they don't fall apart. You may be able to carefully pick them up without the masking paper and keep them together. You can try that also. But the masking paper ensures that you won't mess up. So on the back of all of these little pieces, I'm putting little pieces of foam tape. Now this particular one only took me about 5 or 10 minutes because there aren't that many pieces. So this particular technique, I would say you want something that doesn't have a ton of pieces because you need to put foam tape on the back of each one. I just cut up little pieces of foam tape, but you can use little foam squares if you want to. And notice that I'm not putting any tape where there is the outline piece of the die cut. So then I can remove all of the release paper. I like to use a craft pick to help me out with this. And once I've done that, I'm going to pick up the piece and put it onto the front of a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch white note card. I can then press this down firmly and then remove the masking paper, and we can save that piece of masking paper for another project. And then once I've got that off, I can go ahead and remove the negative space, and I can save that for another card. Now I could have gotten the same effect by doing the craft foam technique that I showed you earlier, but say you have a particular die that is moody and it doesn't want to cut through all those layers, or you don't have craft foam, this is another option, and I find you get great results with it too. So again, this technique works really well if you have a die cut that comes out with all the pieces still intact from the die, so you can always test it like I did before I started my card. For this card, I'm using the Neat and Tangled Happiness stamp set and die set. I've been wanting to use this for a while now. On the front of the card, I used the 2-piece die set to create the layered piece with white and black cardstock. And then I used the stamp set to stamp inside of the card. I also used a white pen to add 3 little dots to each piece just to add a little bit of interest. It's a very simple card, but that dimension really makes it pop. So the front says happiness, and on the inside it says, is having a friend like you. Okay, here's another example that's similar, but this time I'm not using dimension, but rather gluing down all of those tiny pieces all at once. I'm using the Neat and Tangled Hexastar background die, running that through my die cut machine with some white cardstock just to test it out and see what happens. I find that all of the pieces come out just like last time. They all seem to stay intact, so I'm going to do a technique just like I did before, but this time without dimension. So I've inked up another piece of cardstock, and on these I used Spiced Marmalade, Abandoned Coral, and Picked Raspberry Distress Oxide inks. I've run that through my die cut machine without any adhesive or anything on it. It's just the inked cardstock. I'm putting that same piece of masking paper right on top to hold all the pieces in place. You could skip this probably, but I find it helpful. And then I'm just going to use my strong liquid adhesive to add a tiny little dot to the back of each of the pieces. This takes very little time. You can do this in a few minutes. This will not have the dimension the others will have, but it still has a cool look. If you wanted to end up with dimension, you could repeat this process 3 times, stacking all of those little die cuts on top of each other. It's really not that hard to do and much faster than cutting little foam tapes triangles for each of these pieces. Once I have adhesive all over the little pieces, I can put it onto a 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch white note card. And once it's dry, I can remove the masking paper and then carefully remove the outline piece. Now you'll notice that almost all of my triangles stay in place, but a few of them didn't, but that's okay. It's easy to fix that. All I'm going to do is put more adhesive on the back of each of those triangles. I must not have had enough adhesive the first time. So I put little drops on the back, lay it back into place, press those pieces down, give it a few minutes to dry, remove that outline piece, and there we have our perfect pattern background. I just love the look of all of those little pieces arranged so perfectly. So I added one of those happiness layered die cuts to the center and a gemstone into the pattern on the background. Very simple, but sometimes I think simple is best, especially when that background has so much interest. In the inside, I have the greeting is knowing I'll see you again soon. Okay, now for the outline piece, I just added a Hooray layered die cut to the center, and I covered the die cut with a little bit of Tonic crystal glaze so it has some shine to it. I also added little gemstones to the pattern in the background, and we have another very quick and simple card. Okay, my next technique is my favorite. This one results in a background where some of the pieces have dimension to them and some don't. So it really creates something eye-catching. This time I'm trying out the Neat and Tangled Modern Triangle die. And when I take this one out, I noticed that all of the pieces wanted to stay in the die and not come out easily. That's okay. You can use this with all the pieces together in the die with the die still attached and come up with something great. This happens with some dies where the pieces want to stay in place, and it also happens with dies that you use often, but that's okay. We can still come up with a technique using this. So I inked up a piece, ran it through my die cut machine. There's no adhesive on this at all, and I'm leaving all the little pieces in the die. On the bigger pieces, I'm putting foam tape. There's not that many pieces, so it doesn't take that long. And then on the littler pieces, I'm putting some liquid adhesive. So I'll have dimension behind some pieces, but not others. And this would work with any of the dies that I've shown you today. You could even use that masking paper technique if all of the pieces happen to come out of the die at once. So here I'm putting the liquid adhesive down. Once we have all the pieces with some sort of adhesive on them, I'm pressing a 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch note card on top. Now I'm using a craft pick to poke through all the holes in the back of the die. This will make sure that any of the little pieces with the regular adhesive are pushed down onto the card. So you can see how they're being pushed down, making sure that all of the adhesive is touching the note card. Once I've finished doing this, I can remove the die carefully, press everything down with my fingers, and give it some time to dry. Once it's dry, we can remove the negative space, and what we're left with is some pieces with dimension, some glued directly to the card, and it gives you this fun stair-step look. And a big tip, be sure to use a strong liquid adhesive so that the pieces stay in place and don't come up with the outline. Okay, for the accents on these cards, I'm using the Lawn Fawn Party Balloon die set to die cut a yellow balloon, and I did the Celebrate You die cuts from the set I showed you earlier. I'm using my MISTI stamping tool to stamp the word Let's from this Neat and Tangled Better Together stamp set right above the word Celebrate You. The Celebrate You stamp set actually comes with a Let's in it, but it's big and was too big for my balloon, so I found a smaller Let's word. Now I glued that all into the front of my note cards, and I have some silver string here that I'm going to tie around the bottom of the balloon. Then I'm putting liquid adhesive on my fingers to rub all along that string. That'll make sure that the string kind of stays in its shape, kind of waving down towards the bottom of the card, and it also kind of sticks to the card and stays there, so it's not hanging off completely. So here is the first card. I put some gems in the pattern in the background, and you can see how some pieces have dimension and some lay flat. It gives a really cool look. This particular card is going to a friend who went through a really tough treatment and has come out feeling so much better on the other side, so I really think it's worth celebrating. And here is the other one, using the negative space. That's the great thing about today's technique, is that you can get two backgrounds from one process. Okay, I have one more example. This technique is just like our last one, but it worked really well with this particular background die, so I wanted to share it. I've inked up my background again with Distress Oxide inks, but keep in mind you could use pattern paper, solid cardstock, anything you want for these techniques. This time I'm using the Neat and Tangled Inlaid Squares die, and I'll run this through my die cut machine. Any die cut machine should cut background dies just fine. So when I take this out, I notice that the pieces kind of stay in the die. A few want to come out, but not many, so I decided to leave all the pieces in the die. If I wanted to, I could try to get them all out together, but it doesn't look like they're going to do that. They're all going to come falling apart. So by keeping them in the die, I have my best chance of keeping all of the pieces together. So I'm cutting up small pieces of foam tape, and I'll put these on the square die cuts. You'll see in the background pattern, there are some large squares, and then I'll also put them on the back of the teeny tiny square in the center of those. The rest of the pieces I will leave to add liquid adhesive to. So again, we'll get that fun stair-step effect where some of the pieces are glued flat to the card and some have the raised dimension. Another tip when applying your liquid adhesive, don't put big globs down, because when you go to put this on your card, it might ooze out the side and cause pieces to stick that you don't want to stick. So keep that in mind. Onto this, I'm pressing a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch note card, and then I'll flip it over and use my craft pick to press through each of the holes to make sure that all of those little inked pieces are touching the note card below. Now in this case, I'm not going to remove part of the die cut. I'm going to leave all the pieces on the background. So this is a one card from this technique. So all the pieces will be glued there, but we'll have this great dimension because some of the squares are adhered with the foam tape. And it's really neat as you turn it in the light. It's a fun kind of optical illusion card. Now in the center, I die cut a piece of shimmer vellum, and then I white heat embossed the Let's Celebrate greeting from that Celebrate You stamp set. And I also stamped a greeting on the inside. I used Tonic Golden Years confetti. These are little sequins and stars that shine nicely in the light, and I've used them in the past few videos. Okay, so there you have a bunch of card examples, really getting the most out of your background dies by adding dimension and really cool effects. I hope you'll give this a try. I do link the products below in my YouTube description. In the middle are a couple other videos you might like. And please be sure to check out that Celebrate You stamp set so we can raise some money for a good cause. Thanks for spending time here today, and we'll see you soon.